Everyone turned against her, yet her pack was the family she had never known. The snow fell softly on the walls of Valemere Castle, covering the towers and the courtyards in a quiet, white blanket. The wind whispered through the high towers like a voice from some distant memory. Princess Selene stood in the great hall, her hands clenched at her sides, staring at the cold, judgmental faces around her. She had once believed that her home, her family, would protect her. Now every eye seemed filled with accusation. Every whisper cut deeper than a blade. The court had turned against her. Some said she had attempted to harm the king, her own father. Others muttered that she had called dark forces from beyond the mountains, forces that could bring ruin to the kingdom. Selene could not fight them with words. She knew the truth. She had not done what they accused her of, but proof mattered little when fear and suspicion ruled the halls. Tears threatened, but she did not let them fall. Not here, not now. With a heavy heart, she bowed to the king, her eyes locking on him for the first time in years. "I leave," she said, her voice steady, though it shook inside. "I will face whatever lies beyond these walls alone." The guards did not stop her. Perhaps they believed the court's rumors, or perhaps they were relieved to see her go. Selene did not care. Her life was no longer here in Valemere Castle. She turned and left, her long cloak trailing behind her, and stepped into the cold night. The forest awaited. The dark forest beyond the castle was ancient, filled with trees taller than towers, their branches tangled and black against the moonlit sky. Snow crunched under her boots as she walked, each step taking her further from the life she had known. The wind carried strange sounds, howls, rustling leaves, the snapping of twigs, but Selene pressed on. Fear mingled with determination, and for the first time in years she felt alive. She did not walk for long before the first shadow appeared. At first she thought it was a trick of the moonlight, a trick of her mind. But then she heard it, a low growl that made her blood freeze. Her heart raced, and she instinctively stepped back, her hand going to the dagger at her belt. From the shadows, two golden eyes glowed, and a massive wolf emerged, its fur blending with the darkness. Selene froze. The wolf did not attack. It watched her, its gaze intelligent, almost human. Then more figures appeared, wolves, their shapes shifting strangely in the moonlight, larger than normal, moving with careful grace. "You are far from home, princess," a voice said, deep and calm, from the shadows. Selene turned, startled, and saw a man step forward. His eyes were dark as midnight, his hair long and black. He was tall, his presence commanding, and yet there was something wild about him. Around him, the wolves seemed to obey. Who are you?" Selene asked, though part of her already knew he was no ordinary man. "I am Kale," he said, his voice like rolling thunder softened by velvet. "You are not safe here, not in Valemere and not in the open forest, but perhaps you are meant to be with us." "Us?" Selene asked, taking a cautious step back. Her instincts screamed to run, but her curiosity anchored her. Kale nodded toward the forest. "The pack. You have power, princess, the kind that calls to the wild. You are not alone, though the world has turned against you." Selene's heart skipped. Power. She had always felt different, strange, especially around the wolves that sometimes appeared at the edges of her father's lands. Could this man see it? Could he understand it? Before she could answer, the wolves circled closer, moving with a grace that seemed almost unnatural. One of them, larger than the rest, stepped forward, sniffed the air around her, and then lowered its head in what looked like respect. Selene felt a shiver run down her spine. The forest was alive, and these creatures were not ordinary animals. "I can take you in," Kale said, sensing her hesitation. "But you must trust me. The road ahead is dangerous. There are forces hunting you already. You are not the only one who has been betrayed by your own kind." Selene's chest tightened. She did not know if she could trust anyone ever again, not after the court had turned on her. And yet, the forest felt different. It was alive in a way the castle never was, wild and free. Her heart ached for belonging, for a place where she could be herself without fear or accusation. I will try," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. Kale studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded. "Follow me. But remember this, the forest tests those who enter. You will need to prove yourself if you are to stay." Selene followed, her steps careful. The wolves moved silently around her, forming a protective circle. She noticed how Kale walked, his movements fluid, almost predatory, yet controlled. He commanded respect without demanding it, and she found herself drawn to him, despite the caution that screamed at her from within. They traveled deeper into the forest, where the trees grew close and dark, and the snow turned to ice underfoot. Night deepened, and Selene could hear distant howls echoing like sorrowful songs. She shivered not from the cold, but from the feeling that something watched them, something unseen. "You feel it too," Kale said, as if reading her mind. "The eyes that follow. You are not just hunted by men. Dark forces have noticed your power." Selene swallowed hard. She had felt a presence ever since leaving the castle, but now Kale's words made it real. What do they want?" she asked. Kale's jaw tightened. "Control, fear. They would see you broken before you even understand who you are." The wolves slowed, and Kale gestured for her to stay back. "We must move carefully now. The forest will hide us, but only if you are ready to trust it, and us." As they walked, Kale began to speak of the pack, of its members, each one bound by loyalty and ancient magic. Selene listened, fascinated, imagining a life where she might belong. She thought of the cold halls of Valemere, the whispered accusations, the loneliness that had haunted her since childhood. Here in the forest there was danger, yes, but also hope. Hours passed, or perhaps it was days. Time seemed different in the shadowed forest. Selene was tired, cold, and yet exhilarated. She felt her senses sharpening, noticing the sounds of the trees, the smell of the snow, the subtle shifts in the wind. She realized she was learning, slowly, to connect with the forest in a way she had never known. Finally, they reached a clearing where the wolves gathered around a circle of stones. The air was thick with magic, and Selene felt it in her bones, a humming, alive sensation. Kale turned to her. "This is your new home if you choose to accept it, but know this, the forest does not forgive weakness. You will be tested." Selene's heart pounded. She looked at the wolves, at Kale, at the forest itself. For the first time since she had been accused and cast out, she felt something she had never truly felt before, a sense of belonging, fragile yet undeniable. I accept," she said, her voice strong despite the fear that trembled inside her. Kale nodded once, sharply. "Good. Then you will rise or fall, and the forest will judge you as it judges all who seek power within its shadows." As Selene stepped into the circle, the snow seemed to shimmer, and a strange wind lifted her hair. She felt her heart expand with possibility, but also with dread. Somewhere in the distance, a howl rose, a single, lonely sound that made the wolves tense. The wind carried it straight to her ears, and she shivered. "You are not alone," Kale said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "But you must be ready. Whatever comes next will change everything." Selene nodded, swallowing her fear. She did not yet know what awaited her, only that she had taken the first step into a world darker, wilder, and more dangerous than anything she had imagined. She looked into Kale's eyes, and for a moment she thought she saw a reflection of her own loneliness mirrored back at her. Then, in the shadow of the forest, a pair of eyes glowed, a presence watching from the darkness. Selene's breath caught, and her heart leaped into her throat. The forest seemed to hold its breath. She realized with both awe and fear that the exile was only the beginning. And somewhere beyond the trees, something ancient and hungry waited. The forest had grown darker since Selene joined Kale's pack. Snow lay thick between the trees, muffling every sound except for the soft padding of paws and the occasional crack of a branch underfoot. The pack moved as one, silent and precise, a family of predators and protectors that Selene was only beginning to understand. Selene had spent weeks learning the rhythms of the forest, the way the wind carried news, how the wolves could sense the unseen, and how Kale moved as if the shadows themselves obeyed him. Every day brought new challenges, testing her courage, her strength, and most of all, her trust. She was no longer the frightened princess who had fled the castle. She was becoming someone stronger, though she did not yet know the full extent of her power. Kale had been patient, though his patience had limits. He tested her with hunts and rituals, sometimes allowing her to face danger alone, other times guiding her through threats too great for her to face without support. She had learned to control her fear, to listen to the forest, and to call upon the subtle bond she shared with the wolves. And yet, despite these lessons, something in the forest continued to stir uneasily. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and the sky turned a bruised purple, Selene and Kale sat at the edge of a frozen river. The air was sharp and cold, their breath rising in white clouds. Kale's wolf, a massive silver creature named Thorn, stood silently at the water's edge, eyes scanning the shadows. "You feel it too," Selene said softly, her gaze following the dark shapes in the trees. "The same way I felt it the first night I came here." Kale nodded. The shadow has grown stronger. It watches, waits. Whoever or whatever is following you knows more than we do. It is not human, not entirely. Seleni's fingers tightened around the edge of her cloak. Why me? Why now? Kale's jaw tightened. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he studied the river, where ice stretched in jagged shards across the surface. Finally, he said, because your blood is tied to something ancient, something older than Valemere itself. It calls to the dark forces that wish to control it. And because you are alone, they believe you are vulnerable. Selene shivered. She had always felt different, even in the palace, even among the servants who whispered behind her back. Now in the forest, she realized just how unique she truly was. Her heartbeat quickened as she imagined what the shadow might want, power, fear, or destruction. I don't want to be afraid anymore, she admitted, but I can't stop thinking about it, about what's coming. Kale reached out, resting a hand on her shoulder. It was not gentle, but it was steady, grounding. Fear will not save you. Power will, but power alone is not enough. You must trust yourself, and you must trust the pack. Selene nodded, though the words did not fully calm the unease curling in her chest. Trust was difficult. Betrayal had been her constant companion in the castle, and part of her wondered if she was fooling herself by believing she could ever belong anywhere. That night, Selene dreamed of fire and ice. She walked through a city burning under a sky of swirling black clouds. Shadows with glowing eyes crept through the streets, whispering her name. She ran, but the streets twisted and turned, trapping her in a labyrinth she could not escape. Then a voice, low and familiar, whispered in her ear. Selene, you are not alone. She woke with a start, finding Kale standing over her. His dark eyes softened, but there was an intensity there that made her pulse quicken. You were calling to the forest, he said simply. Even in your dreams, Selene frowned. I wasn't calling, I was afraid. And yet the forest answered, Kale said. You are stronger than you think, even when you doubt it. The next morning, Selene noticed changes in the pack. Wolves she had once thought distant now moved closer, watching her with curious eyes. Thorn, the silver wolf, stayed near her constantly, as if guarding her from dangers she could not see. It was comforting and frightening at the same time. During a hunt, Selene realized how much she had grown. She could anticipate the wolves' movements, match their speed and instincts. Her senses were sharper. She could hear the faintest rustle of a rabbit beneath the snow and smell the faintest scent of danger on the wind. Kale watched her silently, pride hidden behind his stoic expression. You are ready for more, he said finally, as the hunt ended and the pack gathered in the clearing. There is a test coming, a force approaches that will not hesitate to harm you or us. Selene's stomach tightened. She wanted to ask questions, but Kale's expression warned her that words would not prepare her. Only action would. That night the shadow made its presence known. It came not as a wolf or a man, but as a creeping darkness that moved through the trees, twisting branches and chilling the air. Selene felt it before she saw it, a weight pressing on her chest, a whisper of power she could not yet control. Kale moved first, stepping between her and the darkness. The wolves growled, forming a protective circle around the clearing. Selene's fear threatened to overwhelm her, but she remembered Kale's words. She breathed deeply, reaching out to the forest, calling on the connection she had been cultivating. The air around her shimmered faintly, and for a moment the darkness paused. You have strength, the shadow hissed, its voice echoing in the trees. But strength is not enough. You belong to me, princess. You cannot hide from what is yours. Selene shook her head, refusing to give in. I am not yours, she said. Her voice was firmer than she expected. And I will never belong to darkness. Kale's hand brushed hers, grounding her. Together they pushed back, not with swords, but with will and presence. The shadow shrieked, twisting away, but Selene felt the weight of its promise. It would return, and it would be stronger. The pack regrouped, silent but watchful. Kale's eyes met hers, dark and unreadable. The shadow will not stop, he said. It knows of your power. It will try to use fear, anger, or doubt. You must resist all of it, otherwise we will all suffer. Selene nodded, her mind racing. Fear was one thing, but doubt could destroy her faster than any shadow. She realized she had to face herself as much as she faced the darkness outside. Over the next days, Selene trained harder than ever. She practiced running through the snow, moving silently, learning to anticipate danger before it appeared. Kale tested her endurance and instincts, sometimes pushing her to exhaustion. And yet, amidst the grueling exercises, there were moments of connection. Small smiles, shared glances, and unspoken words that hinted at something deeper. The forest, too, seemed to respond to her growing power. Leaves shimmered when she passed, the snow shifted under her feet without a sound, and the wolves moved with renewed energy, as if sensing the strengthening bond between her and Kale. But even as she grew stronger, Selene could not forget the shadow. It haunted the edges of her vision, appeared in dreams, and whispered promises of doom. And then one night, she discovered a secret she had not anticipated. Her power was tied not just to the forest, but to her own bloodline. Kale led her to an ancient glade, where the snow glimmered unnaturally, and stones etched with runes surrounded a dark pool. "This is where the truth waits," he said. "Your ancestors made a pact with the spirits of this land, a bond of protection and power, but it is not a gift without cost. You must accept it, or it will consume you." Selene gazed into the pool. Her reflection shimmered, but beneath it, shadows moved, shapes she could not identify. She felt fear, yes, but also determination. This was not a choice she could avoid. She had been cast out, hunted, and betrayed. Now she had a chance to claim her own destiny. "You are ready," Kale said quietly. "But know this, the shadow that follows you is drawn to this power. Whatever happens here will not end the threat, it will only make it stronger." Selene swallowed hard. She nodded, feeling the forest pulse around her, the wolves tense in anticipation. "Then I will face it," she said. Kale's eyes softened for the briefest moment. "We will face it together, but remember, even together, the path is dangerous. Trust your instincts and trust the pack." As Selene stepped toward the pool, a chill wind whipped through the glade. The shadows in the water writhed, forming shapes of wolves, serpents, and things she could not name. Her heart raced, her pulse echoing in her ears. She reached out and the water seemed to respond, rippling and glowing faintly under her touch. A howl shattered the silence. Selene froze. From the trees, the shadow emerged, its form shifting between wolf and smoke, eyes glowing like embers. The forest held its breath. The pack tensed, ready to defend her. And Selene, for the first time, felt the full weight of her power and her destiny. The shadow hissed, circling her. "You cannot escape me," it said. "You belong to the darkness." Selene's hands trembled, but she lifted her chin. "No," she said firmly, "I belong to myself, and to those I choose to protect." The shadow recoiled, but its anger was clear. "Then you will pay," it whispered, before retreating into the trees, leaving only a faint trail of darkness behind. Selene's knees sank into the snow as she exhaled, her body trembling from exertion and relief. Kale knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You have taken the first step," he said, "but this is only the beginning. The shadow will return stronger, and it will not forget." Selene nodded, staring at the fading darkness in the forest. Fear lingered, but so did something else: determination, belonging, and a flicker of hope. For the first time since her exile, she felt that she was not alone, and that perhaps, in the wildness of the forest and the loyalty of the pack, she had finally found a place where she could belong. And somewhere in the depths of the trees, the shadow waited, patient and hungry, knowing that the princess was awakening, and that the next encounter would test everything she had learned. The forest had grown colder, darker, and heavier with snow. Selene could feel it pressing against her, wrapping around her like a shroud. The shadow had returned, as Kale had warned, and this time it was stronger. It moved silently, slipping through the trees like smoke, watching, waiting. Selene's heart raced as she followed Kale and the pack deeper into the woods, where the trees grew close and thick, their branches forming arches like a cathedral of shadows. "You must be careful," Kale said, his voice low, almost a growl. "The shadow knows your power. It will try to turn it against you. You must control it, or it will control you." Selene nodded, but the words offered little comfort. She felt the strange energy that flowed through her, the power she had glimpsed in the glade by the pool, growing stronger, wilder. At times, it surged like a storm inside her chest, filling her with both fear and a strange exhilaration. She had learned to call upon it, to reach into the forest and sense its life, but she could feel the danger it carried. The power was not entirely hers yet. The pack moved cautiously, their eyes sharp, ears alert. Thorn, the massive silver wolf, stayed close to Selene, his presence grounding her. She had grown to trust the pack, their silent loyalty giving her courage. Kale led the way, his movements fluid and precise, a predator and protector all at once. Even in the midst of fear, Selene could not help but feel drawn to him, to the strength he carried, to the quiet warmth that hid beneath his stern exterior. Night fell and the forest was nearly black. Selene shivered, but she did not stop. They reached a small clearing where the snow was trampled and marked with strange symbols. Kale knelt and traced one of the runes with his finger, murmuring words that Selene could not understand. The air thickened, charged with energy, and Selene felt a pull at her chest. "This is it," Kale said quietly. "The heart of the curse. It is old, older than Valemir itself, and it recognizes your bloodline. If you are to master your power, you must face it." Selene's pulse quickened. She wanted to ask what would happen, but she could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She knew instinctively that words would not prepare her for this. "Step forward," Kale instructed. "Do not fear it, do not resist it. Let it show you what you are capable of." Selene took a deep breath and stepped into the center of the clearing. The snow seemed to swirl around her, rising in small spirals, whispering secrets she could almost understand. A shadow formed in the center of the rune circle, dark and writhing, like smoke alive with eyes and teeth. It hissed at her, a voice that chilled her blood. "You are mine," it whispered, curling around her mind like a serpent. "Your power belongs to the darkness. You cannot escape me." Selene's knees trembled, but she remembered Kale's words. She forced herself to focus, to reach into her chest and draw upon the bond she shared with the forest. The power surged, bright and fierce, but it felt like a storm about to break. "I am not yours," she said, her voice trembling but growing stronger, "and I will not let you take me." The shadow lashed out, tendrils of dark energy swirling around her. Pain lanced through her body, and she cried out, stumbling backward. But the pack moved instantly, forming a protective circle. Kale's hand brushed hers, grounding her again. "Use it," he urged. "Do not fight the power, channel it." Selene focused, reaching into the forest, into the snow, into herself. The energy responded, not as something separate from her, but as a part of her. Light flared from her hands, a cold, bright blue that cut through the darkness. The shadow shrieked, recoiling from the force, and Selene felt it like ice on her skin, a warning and a release at the same time. The struggle lasted minutes, or perhaps hours. Time seemed to stretch as she wrestled with the darkness, learning to bend it without being consumed. Kale stayed close, whispering guidance and encouragement, his presence a tether to reality. The wolves circled, their growls a low, steady rhythm that seemed to harmonize with the energy inside her. Finally, with a roar that echoed through the forest, Selene forced the shadow back. It did not vanish, but it recoiled, retreating into the trees with a hiss. She fell to her knees, exhausted, shivering from the cold and the effort of controlling such raw, wild power. Kale knelt beside her, lifting her chin with gentle hands. "You did it," he said softly. "You faced the heart of the curse, but this is only the beginning. The power you hold is dangerous to yourself and to others. You must learn to control it fully, or it will consume you." Selene nodded, biting her lip. She had felt the darkness within her, the pull of something ancient and hungry. She had faced it, yes, but she knew she had not yet mastered it. Over the next days, Selene trained harder than ever. Kale guided her, testing her limits, pushing her further than she thought possible. She learned to sense danger before it appeared, to call upon the forest's energy in a controlled way, and to move with the wolves as if they were extensions of her own body. But with power came fear. Sometimes at night, Selene would wake in a cold sweat, feeling the shadow in her dreams, whispering threats and promises of destruction. Kale stayed close, watching over her, but even he could not protect her from the darkness within her own blood. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Selene and Kale sat by a small fire, the wolves resting nearby. The air was quiet, filled with the smell of pine and snow. Selene stared into the flames, thinking about what she had learned and what she had yet to face. "Kale," she said softly, "do you think I can control it? The power, the curse?" Kale's eyes were serious, dark with worry and something else she could not name. "You can," he said, "but it will not be easy. You have strength, yes, but the darkness knows your fears. It will try to use them. You must be stronger than your fear, stronger than your doubt." Selene nodded, feeling both fear and determination. "I will try," she whispered. Kale reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You will do more than try," he said. "You will rise, and I will be here every step of the way." Selene felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words, a connection deeper than friendship, more complicated than loyalty. She wanted to reach for him, to let herself trust him completely, but doubt lingered. She had been betrayed before. Could she truly allow herself to rely on someone again? The next day, the shadow returned, more powerful than before. It attacked not just Selene, but the pack itself, twisting trees and snow into sharp, biting forms. Wolves howled and leapt, fighting the darkness with teeth and claws, but even they struggled. Selene felt panic rise, but she remembered Kale's words: control, channel, do not resist. She stepped forward, letting the power rise through her like fire and ice. The shadow screamed, lashing out, but Selene did not falter. She focused, reaching into the heart of the forest, into herself, and forced the darkness back with a burst of energy that left the snow glowing faintly blue. The shadow shrieked and vanished, leaving the forest quiet once more. Selene fell to her knees, gasping for breath, her body trembling from exhaustion. Kale knelt beside her, his hand steadying her. "You are stronger than you know," he said softly. Selene looked up at him, her eyes filled with both fear and something else, hope perhaps, or longing. "But what if I fail next time?" she whispered. Kale's gaze was steady, unwavering. "Then I will face it with you," he said. "And so will the pack. You are not alone, Selene." Never again. For the first time since her exile, Selene believed him. She looked at the pack, at the wolves who had become her family, and felt a surge of belonging she had never known in the palace. She was no longer the princess who had fled. She was part of something greater, something wild, loyal, and alive. But even as she allowed herself a moment of peace, a flicker of movement in the shadows reminded her that the threat was far from over. The curse was not defeated. The shadow was patient, waiting for weakness. And Selene knew that the next time it came, she would need every ounce of her power, courage, and trust in Kale, and in herself. As night fell over the forest, the snow glimmered faintly under the moonlight, and the pack gathered around Selene. She could feel the pulse of the forest beneath her feet, the quiet strength of her family surrounding her, and the warmth of Kale's presence at her side. And somewhere deep within the trees, the shadow watched, waiting, knowing that the true test was yet to come. The forest was alive with tension. Snow crunched under heavy paws as Kale's pack moved swiftly, weaving through the trees with a precision that only long years of loyalty could teach. Selene walked among them, her senses sharpened, her heart steady. She had grown stronger, learned to master her powers, and faced the shadow. But now a new threat approached, Valemere itself. Soldiers, torches in hand, marched toward the forest, blind to the ancient magic that waited among the trees. Kale's jaw tightened. "They think they can take you," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "They do not understand what you are or what you are capable of." Selene nodded, her eyes steady. She had feared her bloodline, feared her curse, and feared her own power, but she had learned. She had survived the darkness, faced the shadow, and discovered strength she had never known. Now she was ready to face the world that had cast her out. The pack stopped at the edge of a clearing. Ahead, the soldiers' torches glowed like fireflies against the night. Selene could hear the clanking of armor, the shouts of officers giving orders. Her pulse quickened, but not with fear. She felt focus, purpose, and the quiet confidence of someone who knew they belonged. "Stay close," Kale instructed. "Do not act rashly." "The first strike will set the tone for everything," Selene nodded. She raised her hands, feeling the energy within her pulse and twist. Snow lifted gently from the ground, swirling in soft spirals around her. The air hummed with power. The soldiers faltered at the sight, at the glow, at the sudden movement of the trees and wind. Some whispered of sorcery, others drew their swords with trembling hands. Kale moved beside her, his presence both steady and commanding. He nodded once, and the wolves stepped forward, circling the clearing. The soldiers hesitated, sensing the unnatural strength of the pack. Thorn, the massive silver wolf, stepped into the light, his eyes like molten gold, and the humans froze in awe and fear. Selene's voice rang out, clear and strong. "I am Selene of Valemere," she declared. "Cast out by fear, hunted by lies, but I am no longer powerless. This forest, this pack, and the strength within me are my family, and I will not allow you to harm them or me." The soldiers faltered. A few advanced, thinking to challenge her, but the forest itself seemed to rise against them. Branches twisted and shifted, forming barriers and shapes that blocked their path. Snow swirled violently, stinging their faces, forcing them to pause. The shadow she had faced before appeared briefly at the tree line, as if drawn to the conflict, observing. Its eyes glowed with hunger, but Selene did not falter. She drew the energy within her fully, feeling it flow through her, binding with the forest and the pack around her. She could feel Kale beside her, steady and strong, and the loyalty of the wolves surrounding her. Together, they formed a force that was unyielding. The first soldier swung his sword, but the snow lifted under Selene's control, forming a barrier that knocked him off balance. Another officer tried to advance, but Thorn leapt, moving faster than the eye could follow, forcing him to retreat. The soldiers began to realize they faced more than a girl. They faced power older than their kingdom, stronger than their fear. Kale's voice cut through the wind. "Hold your ground, protect her." The pack moved as one, coordinated and deadly in their presence. Wolves darted, shadows shifted, and Selene guided the energy around her like an invisible hand. She had never felt so alive or so certain of her place in the world. Yet amidst the battle, she saw the toll on Kale. He moved tirelessly, protecting the pack, shielding her, giving orders to the wolves while fending off threats. He carried the weight of leadership with a quiet strength, one that Selene admired and feared for at the same time. Her chest ached with something she could not name: pride, gratitude, longing. But there was no time for hesitation. The fight was not over. Hours seemed to pass like minutes as the soldiers struggled against the combined might of Selene's power and the pack's loyalty. The shadow watched from the edge of the trees, its form twisting, waiting for a moment of weakness. Selene could feel it, a pulse of darkness that mirrored her own. The thought made her shiver, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the energy in her hands, the rhythm of the forest, the unity of the pack. Finally, the officers realized the futility of their attack. The forest held them, the wolves barred their path, and Selene herself radiated a strength that made them falter. Slowly, the soldiers retreated, fear overtaking duty. Torches flickered, and the snow settled, leaving the clearing quiet once more. Selene sank to her knees, exhausted, her hands trembling. Kale knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You have done it," he said softly. "You faced the kingdom itself, and you did not falter." Selene's chest heaved with both relief and fatigue. I could not have done it without you, without the pack," she admitted. Her voice was quiet but sincere. "I never knew what family really meant." Kale's dark eyes softened just for a moment. "You have found it now," he said. "This is your family, Selene. Not those who turned against you, but those who stand with you, who fight for you, who believe in you." Selene smiled faintly, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She looked at the wolves, at Thorn, at the pack who had become her family, and then back at Kale. Her chest swelled with gratitude, pride, and something deeper. Trust, loyalty, love. She realized she had feared these feelings, but now she could not deny them. As the night settled over the forest, the shadow appeared one last time. Its form was taller, more threatening, a swirling mass of smoke and hunger. It hissed at Selene, whispering promises of destruction and chaos. "You have grown strong," it said. "But this is not the end. The darkness always waits, and it always remembers." Selene stood, raising her hands, feeling the pulse of the forest and the power within her. "Then I will be ready," she said firmly. "I will protect my family, my pack, and myself. I am not afraid of you or of what I am." The shadow recoiled, then vanished into the night, leaving only a faint chill in the air. Selene exhaled, feeling a mixture of triumph and relief. She had faced the darkness, controlled her power, and protected those she loved. She had become more than a princess cast out. She had become a leader, a protector, a force to be reckoned with. Kale stepped closer, his eyes dark and unreadable but warm. "You did it," he said again, "and you did not lose yourself in the process." Selene's heart beat faster as she met his gaze. I could not have done it without you," she whispered. Kale's lips curved in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Nor I without you," he said. "Together we are stronger than any shadow, any kingdom, or any curse." The pack gathered around them, close and loyal, sensing the quiet shift in power, the unbreakable bond between Selene and Kale, between her and the forest. Wolves brushed against her legs, tails wagged softly, and Thorn rested his massive head on her shoulder. For the first time, Selene felt completely, irrevocably at home. Days passed, and the forest settled into a new rhythm. The soldiers no longer dared approach, fearing the power they had witnessed. The shadow had retreated, but Selene knew it would return. And when it did, she would be ready. She had learned control, courage, and trust, both in herself and in those who had become her family. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Selene and Kale walked through a quiet glade. Snow crunched softly under their feet. The air was still calm and filled with possibility. "You've changed," Kale said, his voice quiet, almost reflective. "Stronger, more certain, more yourself." Selene smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. "And you've changed me," she said softly. "Taught me what it means to trust, to fight, to belong." Kale reached out, brushing her hair from her face. Then we are both lucky, he said. The forest, the pack, even the darkness has taught us what matters. Selene felt a surge of emotion. She had begun her journey as a cast-out princess, betrayed and alone. Now she was part of something greater, something wild, loyal, and alive. She had faced curses, shadows, and the fear within herself, and she had risen. The forest seemed to hum around them, the snow shimmering faintly in the moonlight. Wolves padded silently, surrounding them like guardians, and for a moment the world was at peace. Selene looked up at Kale, her eyes bright with both joy and determination. Whatever comes next, she said, we face it together, no fear, no doubt, only us, the pack, and the forest. Kale nodded, dark eyes glinting. Together, he agreed, always. And in the quiet of the night, with the snow falling softly around them, Selene felt a sense of completion, of belonging, and of hope. She had faced exile, shadow, and fear, and she had found strength, love, and family where she had least expected it. Somewhere deep in the forest, a faint shimmer hinted at distant darkness, waiting, patient, and hungry. But Selene no longer feared it. She had grown, and she would rise stronger, ready for whatever lay ahead. The pack gathered closer, their warmth surrounding her. Kale's hand brushed hers once more, and Selene knew with absolute certainty that she was home.